Hello and welcome to Love, Dating, and Relationships for Spiritual Women. My name is Julie Grimm and I'm your host. I am a healer and spiritual guide in the Modern Mystery School, and I am so excited to have with me today Karla Gomez. I'm going to change the view for us. There we go. Karla is an Ayurvedic practitioner. She is the co-founder of SheIsPowerful.global. She is also a craniosacral therapist, practices breathwork and yoga. So thank you so much for joining us, Karla.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, Julie.
Yes, of
I
course.
really love the invitation. Thank you.
Yes, so lovely to get to be connected with you today. So just to launch into it, I know that clearly, so you do Ayurveda, you do breathwork, you do craniosacral, you're clearly inundated in the healing arts and using those different tools to support yourself. So how has your own healing, or as you like to say, putting yourself first, affected your relationships?
Oh my gosh. Well, in a nutshell, I definitely am a person that, first of all, my culture is I'm a Latina. So I don't even like to use the word Latina actually. So I'm South American. My family comes from Colombia, and generally just even that culture is very always giving, right? So you're giving, you place yourself last on the ladder, on the rungs, and you're always making sure that your children and your husband have everything first. So I was really raised in that environment, and just along the way, I just feel that it's so easy to lose yourself when you're not considering yourself first. And I've learned along the way that the more you really fill up your own glass of water, fill up your own well, that then you have more to give. And you're not coming from a place of scarcity, like you're so tired giving out to everybody. You're like really like, wow, I have so much energy. I can just share. I can share more, and I can do it because I really want to, and not because it's like I'm the mom, right? Or I'm the wife, or I'm the partner, or I'm whatever.
Yeah, it's not that duty or that obligation, like that should. That's where I've become
Yeah.
very aware of where the should comes in. I'm like, I'm suspicious of this thing I'm telling myself I should do. It doesn't feel like a good energy.
I feel like should, would, could, busy, have to, all those words should just be eliminated from the dictionary, because they just carry a lot of guilt, they carry a lot of like pressure to act a certain way or be a certain person rather than just being yourself. Just be
Yeah.
honest.
And that's what before when we were talking, before this interview, you were talking about boundaries and really setting your own boundaries, which also has to do with being yourself, right?
Yes.
Because if you
Yes.
don't tell somebody, hey, you crossed a line.
Yeah. Then you're really kind of, in my mind, you're kind of faking it till you make it, right? So you're letting somebody believe you're something else, and it'll come back to bite you in the end, because then, you get married for someone and they think you're somebody else, and then, or have a boyfriend relationship, girlfriend relationship. 5 years later or 2 years later, whatever it is, you're like, that's not really who I am. You've almost trained that person to expect those reactions and responses because you're just trying to make them happy.
And
So
to that point, and then they might not even really know the real you.
exactly. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, I've got so many stories in relation to that. In particular, a person who lied to me for over a decade, and I was like so flabbergasted. I was like, oh, sorry. I was like, wow, I cannot believe you're you're now trying to tell me you're somebody else after all this time. I was totally floored, and I was like, wow, I cannot believe that. So yeah, so we have a responsibility not only to others, but first and foremost, a responsibility to ourselves, right? We need to be authentic, and we have to really listen to our soul, our spirit. What does our heart say, right? It's not such a mental game, but it's more of like the gut instinct. What makes you happy? What motivates you? What brings you joy, right? Instead of just like playing the game, or agenda behind the agenda, or what can I get out of this one, or how do I make it so that I look better in the situation, or et cetera, et cetera.
That's so important. And that's part of the reason why I actually wanted to create this series, because I think that so much dating advice, at least that I got when I was younger, was about that playing the game, whether it wasn't even really trying to be, but that's, yeah, I can see from your face that it was the same, right?
Totally. Oh my gosh, totally. I mean, honestly, my parents were immigrants, are immigrants, and my mom didn't she didn't really know the rules here and stuff. So she thought I would get in trouble to go to if I went to school and I was like, "Mom, I don't feel well this morning," and you're a little kid, and she'll say, "Okay, don't worry, I'll take you to school later," and she'll say, "Tell your teacher you were at the dentist." Right? So she kind of like started instilling this little white lies inside of me where I was like, well, that's what we're supposed to be doing, right? We're not really supposed to be telling people where we really are or what we're really doing, because then we're letting them in on, oh, I was too tired, or my mom, let me stay home. And so she's going to get in trouble, like that kind of thing. It's really wild.
It's so interesting how that messaging just sort of seeps in without us totally seeing that that's what it is.
Yeah. I was thinking about that the other day. It came to me. I'm like, how did this all start? Like, how does it start? Like, you don't grow up thinking like you should lie, or you should say anything that isn't true. Even if you get caught with your hand in the cookie jar, like for sure, like our brain is like, what do I say? Yeah, it's me. No, it's not me. Like for sure you do that, right? But how does it become a lifestyle?
It's interesting too, because what you're saying in a sense is that not advocating for your boundaries, not drawing a line, is actually lying in a way. It's a white lie.
Absolutely.
But yeah, and it's interesting too, when you were talking about this partner that you had, I wonder, do you feel like he knew the whole time that it was not true, or was it something that like over time he became aware of? Because I know for myself, sometimes I haven't totally, I mean, I've probably I'm lying to myself is what it is.
Right.
There's some internal lack of integrity, and then I only after a long time maybe do I finally say, okay, I'm realizing this is actually a boundary. Sorry that it's been so long. I just have to tell you now.
Right. Well, no, I think there's two things happening. I think that is ongoing. There is a lack of like really like authentically knowing himself, which I realize, which is why we're no longer together. But then this other lie, he knew what he was doing.
Okay.
So he just didn't want me to know that I knew what I already knew about him. He didn't want me to know it like concretely, right?
These complicated dances and games that we do, it's so interesting. And for what? You kind of have to wonder, is it like because we're afraid somebody would leave us, or we're ashamed of something?
Yeah, well, I told my son, I have a son, he's 13, and he's really like, he's really aware, he's very awake, and he asked me all kinds of questions that are, like, where do we go when we die and stuff, and he's like 5 years old, right? So now he's 13, and I had a conversation with him. He saw me. I was very upset when I learned the news, and he asked me what was wrong, and I said, well, this person lied to me. And he's like, okay, but like, whatever, it's a lie. And I'm like, no. I said, you need to understand that when you lie, you take away the other person's opportunity to for everyone to put their cards on the table, and then you can come together and find a solution or decide, okay, it's not working out, right? So it takes courage to be vulnerable, but actually that vulnerability is a strength, right? You're really coming from yourself. You're realizing, okay, maybe you do whatever you do a couple of times and you're like, oh shit, maybe I shouldn't be doing that, right? And so then you have the choice, because one time, okay, whatever, okay, let it slide. 2 times, 3 times, you're now doing it on purpose.
Yeah, there's a different energy there. And what you were saying too really struck me about it's almost like when you have that courage to say what's been going on and to admit the lie, you're also saying, I'm giving this partnership another opportunity.
Exactly. So that's to me. So when I explained it to my son, I said, you cannot lie. You cannot lie to anybody, especially people that you say you love. If you're doing that to somebody you say you love, then you're doing it all the time to everybody else as well. So what's your truth? Like, what are you basing your life on? Is it always to like look and appear a certain way, or is it because, that just means you're totally, completely insecure?
Yeah, and that's no foundation for a solid relationship. It's just not a very good starting point.
Yeah, it just means you're not grounded. You're not grounded and you don't trust.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where like having your boundaries and knowing, you knowing to trust that you have the internal fiber to say, no, I don't like that. Or, it's really to say no when you mean no and yes when you mean yes. It's just really is so simple.
Yeah, but when you paint it in that light, it really emphasizes how crucial and important it is, because people talk a lot about boundaries. I've obviously explored that as well in relationships, but putting it in that framework where it's like you're basically sabotaging the relationship, or saying even like, I don't, for what I'm too insecure, for whatever reason, I'm not capable of being in this partnership. When
Yeah,
we routinely do not express our truth, that's actually what we're doing and
yeah,
saying.
absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. 100%. And so like, I don't know, like if you want to keep living in this like la la land of where you think you're calling the shots and you think people can still see through you. You know what I mean? Like even if they don't have proof, or you don't catch you with your hand in the cookie jar, like they'll know. Like, okay, there's less cookies, like who ate them? You know what I mean? Like you just know. You'll just know. I mean, anyone who's really in touch with themselves emotionally will be able to feel like the vibration is off, like something is off.
Yeah, and that goes to what you were saying about trusting your instinct. I mean, there's things that we can't really explain, but we can absolutely tell if somebody's really not in integrity with themselves. And even for me, I know there's been plenty of times where I haven't asserted in a boundary because, yeah, I felt insecure, I felt shame, and they
Mm.
knew, whether they double checked, they triple checked, there was some sort of understanding, like something feels off here, and I want to check in about that again.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I just think I'm just raising my kids, because I also have a daughter. She's 19, and I'm just really raising my kids like, just like, who are you? Who are you? What do you feel in your heart? What makes you happy? What do you think you want? Even if you start off doing something that you think you like and then you switch 5 times, like it doesn't matter. As long as you're fully happy doing what you're doing and you're discovering yourself a little bit every time and every experience, and meeting people and trying to really be authentic as much as possible, man, the world is your oyster.
And what a great starting point that is. If we had been raised that way, my
Oh my
parents
God.
they did the best they could, right? But definitely those messages around follow your heart, I didn't get them from my parents, at least. And so having that at a young age, and really, what you're talking about too, trusting yourself and learning that you can trust yourself, is just so valuable.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny that, because I have in Ayurveda, in my consultations, I have girls as young as 16, 15 that are my clients. Like I feel like I'm getting younger and younger girls that are really like aware. They're like, something's wrong and I don't know what it is, right? That's generally what they say. So then I'll just ask them, what do you feel? Like what do you, like I never really ask them, okay, don't write me a list of pros and cons, right? That's useless, because then that's your mind deciding, well, that's a better choice for me because of this, this, and this. And so you're always going to be left wanting whatever you do when you make a decision from your mind, right? So that's like a fixed mindset versus what is it, open mindset, or I can't remember,
Yeah,
flexible
like a
mindset.
growth mindset.
Right,
And
growth
just
mindset.
the power of our heart. I do energy healing, and the heart is this amazing mediator between the body and higher spiritual dimensions. And our body matters. I mean, you
Yeah.
are an Ayurvedic practitioner, so you know the magic that we can weave when we feed ourselves correctly. Before we did this interview, you were talking about times of day,
Yeah.
structure to our day, how that can just be so supportive and transformative for our health and well-being. But of course, also we are spirit too.
Mhm.
And how could our mind possibly integrate spirit and body? I mean, it does the best it can, but the heart is that point, that central point that can do it without us even knowing that that's what it's been doing.
So this is my take on that, right? So I also work in a thing called quantum flow, and quantum flow is completely about like quantum physics. So it really is like our thoughts are electric and our body's magnetic, right? And so we have this electric magnetic field around us. And so whatever we're thinking on a regular basis, that's what becomes our frequency, right? So we put this out, and what do we draw back? We draw back magnetically to our body and to our environment and to the way that we're living. So if we're scared, let's say you're scared of like being alone. Okay. So this is perfect for this topic, right? We're scared we're going to be alone. So you keep thinking in your mind, oh my God, I'm so scared I'm going to be alone one day. Like I'm never going to find a partner. And I just can't ever find the person that I think they're never going to love me. They don't like me. They're something, right? This is the message you're sending out to the universe. So the universe is like, well, okay then. So really you're not prepared, or we're just going to leave you alone. And so your existence then becomes that, right?
Right. Or it draws to you, I've seen for myself plenty of times, it draws to you people who are going to make you feel alone or
Yeah.
emotionally abandon you, or just not really be, what you ideally would like, but they're confirming that thought
Exactly.
pattern.
Exactly. So there's such a thing as like, of course, everyone knows karma, but there's also such a thing as future karma. So the
Mm.
day how you live your life on a daily basis, it's the same thing as quantum physics, right? The way you live your life today, it's a precursor for tomorrow. So what are you thinking? How are you feeling, right? What do you keep going around and around in your mind? How many times are you thinking those thoughts? As opposed to really thinking, what do I really want? How do I want my life to be? I see this beautiful, magnificent partner in my life, and they bring me so much joy and bliss, and I'm so happy. So, it not only goes with like thinking and feeling that way and trusting yourself and being and acting like that person who has that partner, right? You're no longer acting like a person from scarcity. You're acting like, wow, I'm valuable. I have some worth. I'm super confident and I love myself. So who wouldn't want to love me? I'm amazing, right? Like that's like the direction you kind of have to go in. It's not like you're full of yourself, and it's not like you're selfish or you're, out of integrity, because you have to love yourself in order if you want somebody else to love you. You know what I
So
mean?
important. And I know too, you were talking before we got on this call about like morning practices. I mean, everything that there's just so much from what you're saying that I'm getting inspired about. But it's like each day when we wake up, we have an opportunity to set the tone
Totally.
for the day, but also what you're saying for the future, for what
Absolutely.
we're creating. And
Yes.
so these practices, whether it's Ayurveda, eating correctly for ourselves at the correct times,
Hmm.
or you had mentioned before gratitude practices, or now even this practice of like visualizing my life, we can really create magic and send
Absolutely.
out these new realities for ourselves.
Totally. Yes. Listen, the one thing, so I was asked this, I was on another talk on Instagram, 6 months ago, when COVID had just kind of really, we're just in the first quarter of it or something. And the person said to me, like, what the conversation was struck up because a mutual person that a lot of people knew had hurt himself, and he was no longer living, right? So he's like, what do we do? What do we tell people who have gone down this rabbit hole and can't get out? And for me, and I'll tell this 1,000 times over, you only need one thing to be grateful for in your life, right? If your circumstance is so terrible, right? Which it can be, you can be in the worst circumstances. You just need one thing that's going to make it that you're like, wow, I'm so grateful I have a bed, or I'm so grateful I have shoes. I'm so grateful I had something to eat today, or I'm so grateful I'm breathing, right? Gratitude is the one thing.
That made me just take a deep breath. You said, I'm so grateful I'm breathing, and I realized I was not breathing deeply, and I went,
yes, like gratitude, the sense of gratitude changes everything. It changes everything. And if you were just to do a gratitude practice every single day and every single night, so let's say you wake up, you open your eyes, you're still in the theta brainwave state. So it's really important. That's the state the kids are in mostly when they're really young. And so we absorb a lot when we're young, right? We really absorb information. So as soon as you wake up, you're still in that brain state. And the first thing you say is like, wow, I'm so grateful. And it's something regarding yourself. So sometimes this is really hard for people who aren't used to like loving themselves, and they don't know how. They're like, well, what do I say? I'm like, well, if you can't think of anything, you could just say you have great hair. I'm so grateful I have great hair. Like, right, you could say I'm so grateful I have good skin. Like there's so many people who have acne, or I'm so grateful like that yesterday I just really sat quietly and just was so listening to somebody else. It doesn't have to be a massive like, oh my God, it can really be something really minute, but it has to be about you. And then the second one, I always say three. The second one can be like, oh my gosh, this is the best. I'm so grateful I'm going to have a hot shower. I'm so grateful I have a steaming hot cup of coffee. I'm so grateful my son gave me a hug, or my daughter said good morning, whatever, And the last one is the manifesting one. So you're like, let's say you want to write a book. You imagine yourself already having written the book, and you imagine yourself receiving an award for that book. Or like you're a best-selling author and you're like, wow, I made the list. I'm like, God, I'm so grateful I made the list. And then you visualize yourself. What are you wearing? What are you doing? Who are you talking to? Who's with you? Like really like put yourself in that situation. If you do that every single morning, and you do it every single night before you go to bed, like literally the last words you say to yourself, you're helping to reprogram your subconscious mind. It has this record playing of like whatever, trauma, scarcity, fear, et cetera, et cetera. So these things are really important to you. And if you are able to, there's different ways of working your subconscious mind, but you still need to replace that old record with a new one.
It's almost like you're hijacking the software, you're reprogramming it. You're like, okay, we didn't like that program. We didn't like what that created. We're going to create this new one, and I'm going to take that time. I also love, though, everything that you're saying. It's so practical and grounded in these daily rhythms. Yeah. And I know for myself, talking to a lot of people, COVID has really just upturned their daily rhythms and also their sense of being able to plan for the future, because everything's so flexible and changeable. But, what you're saying is that every day we're creating the future. So I might not be able to say, oh, the trip that I take every year is going to happen and here's my flight tickets, because that's a little bit out of my control right now.
Yeah, totally.
The country might not let me travel. But what I can do is take exquisite care of myself every day. And okay, if I mess up, at least in that morning time and at that evening time, to sort of really anchor myself into that future that I desire for myself.
What it does, it does two things. So it definitely gives you a vision of who you, it's almost like who you really, your highest and best version of yourself, right? You're putting that out in the future, but you're pulling it back into you. So you're thinking of it as electric rod, and you're drawing back in it magnetically with feelings, emotion, right? So you're really feeling it. So you're doing that, but also when you take stock of like, wow, you know what? My son was so sweet, and he brought me, I don't know, tea to my bed in the morning and said good morning to me. Like, it makes you present, right? You're in the here and now. And that's more important because there's so many people who suffer from anxiety because they're like, oh my God, what about tomorrow? And this and the now curfew or the deadlines or blah blah blah, or, you know, a million and one things. So it
Yeah.
keeps you present. And that's actually like the word itself, right? It's a gift. Like you have to be here. You can't just be living in the past from like, you know, we all have traumas, we all have stuff, we all have things that are like we have to get rid of, and it's a process, right? But if we're able to really at least twice a day just be anchored in the fact of like, wow, you know, I had such a wonderful conversation with my mom, and I usually normally don't get along with her, and we really came to like a really wonderful talk for 5-10 minutes. You know, it changes your perspective of like what is important for you.
And it helps shift you out. I noticed, I think anxiety 100%. And also people's response right now, especially to being isolated, is depression.
Absolutely.
And so that gratitude, it's really shifting us out of those states that are, you know, harmful for our mental and our emotional well-being, and instead helping us see that maybe everything isn't terrible. Like you said, maybe some things aren't going that well, right?
Yeah.
That happens, but
Sure.
maybe it's not the end of the world. Maybe there is still a silver lining here, that, and if we focus on that, if we, like you were saying, using this magnetism and our own thoughts to help even amplify that and create
Totally.
something stronger.
Totally. And I think that you know, when you're resonating at a low vibration, like depression, anger, fear, like all that stuff is a low vibration, right? So there's a saying in Ayurveda. It says like attracts like, right? So when you're vibrating at that level for whatever reasons, you're there, right? You're in fear, you're in whatever. So you're gonna attract the same things in either other people, other situations, like it's gonna be stay like that. The moment, and I kid you not, because everything I tell people to do, I practice it, I try it, I like totally live it because I want to see how it works, right? So the moment that you start living in any type of gratitude, like you rise, right? So you're no longer in anger and frustration and fear. Okay, yes, maybe you will be. You'll dip back a little bit, but then you'll go back to gratitude, and then you'll drip back a little bit more, and it's less and less and less, and you're more and more and more in gratitude. And so what does gratitude bring you? Compassion, love, generosity, radiance, magnetism, right? So you keep going up and up and up and up. So everyone else that's radiating down here at like fear and everything else, you don't see eye to eye anymore. So you might find yourself alone, but trust me, it's a lot better to be alone and being radiating and in love with yourself and being magnetic than being in a cesspool of people who are all like in fear, right?
You're talking about the dating apps now. So just while you're talking, because I'm very much in the dating phase of my life, I'm thinking about, okay, you know, when I'm attracting partners and when I'm meeting people, obviously it's really not about quantity over quality, it's about quality over quantity. And so as much as I can help my own energy rise and stay in those positive places, that's also the partner that I'd be attracting, because I don't really care to attract a really depressed partner. You know, no offense, everybody has their baggage, and I'm, you know, I'm not a pristine emotional person either, right? I have my down days. But regardless, I would much rather attract somebody who's operating exactly what you were saying, in that realm of gratitude, and I forget all the words you used. Magnificence, I think it was. Like, yes, I want that. Give that to me. That sounds great.
Yeah, like who doesn't want to see, like when you're at a party and you see some shiny person, you know, when we had parties, right? Like
Right.
shiny person
If I
walking
can remember that, yes.
and you see them and they're like literally radiating, like that's what I want. You know, I want to be either like that person or with that person.
Agreed. Agreed. So, note to self, these are amazing practices that you're sharing with us. So powerful. We're kind of getting to time, but last minute, I love stories. And you had mentioned that you have an amazing story about manifestation. when you met your daughter's father. So I don't know if you'd like to share that with us now.
Yeah, of course. Oh my gosh. So this was in my 20s, and I had finished university, and I was like, I'm out of town. I'm out of here. I'm getting out of here. I didn't even stay for my ceremonies. I was like, I'm out of here. So I had like a limited amount of money and a plane ticket and a URL pass, right? So I had one friend, childhood friend that lived in London, and he's like, yeah, come over, come couch surf. I'm like, all right, cool, I went there and I traveled all around Europe. I did all kinds of stuff. And then
That's so much fun. You did the Eurorail. That was always a dream of mine. How
yeah,
fun.
so much fun. And you meet so many people, right? That's actually an amazing way to really get to know who you are.
Mm.
It's really cool. Like you really, it's a very eye-opening experience. So anyways, moving forward, I get back to London, and my best friend says, he's like, you're not going to go back to Montreal, are you, for the summer? And I'm like, he goes, you're crazy if you go. You're in London for the summer. Like, I stay. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to stay. So I got this little job in Notting Hill in this little cafe. And he's like, stay as long as you want, but like, try and find yourself a place. I'm like, okay. So I had an appointment to go see a flat, and I was walking down this one-way street in London, and this car drives up. It passes me, and then it drives back and parks on the side. And I'm like, okay, that's weird. This person jumps out of the car, and he looks at me, and I'm like, finally. This is the one word that pops into my mind, right? It's like, finally. He walks up to me. I'm like, oh my God, this is the most gorgeous man I've ever met in my life. And he starts talking to me, and he's like, I normally don't do this, and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, I really don't care, because I know I'm supposed to meet you. It's just what it is. Like, I'm just going to play hard to get, because that's, I don't want to be too eager or whatever, right? But in my mind, I was already like, done deal for me, right? So anyways, he says to me, he seems like he's in a rush, and I'm like, he's like, what are you doing? Like, I went down the street. He went down a one way. He wasn't supposed to go down it because he was avoiding traffic, because London gets very congested, right? And he goes, I went down this one way, and he's like, I'm not even supposed to be here. It was totally supposed to happen, right? So I'm like, I have to go look at this flat in this right here. And so he's like, he looks at it. It looks a little dodgy. He's like, he says to me, would you like me to go look at it for you? And I'm like, sure, why not? He goes to look at the flat. He runs back down. He's like, no. He goes, it's not for you. And I'm like, what do you mean it's not for me? He goes, trust me, this is not the place for you. I'm like, who is this person? So then he says, okay, listen, I have to run. I have to go. If I give you my number, will you call me? And I'm like, yeah, playing it cool, right?
You're like, I'll
yeah.
think about it.
Yeah, totally. I'm like, yeah, I'll call you. And he's like, no, really. If I give it to you, will you call me? I'm like, yeah, I'll call you. He writes down his number in my journal that I've been traveling with, and he underlines it, exclamation. And he's like, I gotta go. He gets in his car, and then he drives away. And then he drives back. He does the same thing again. He rewinds the car, right? And then he runs up the steps. I'm still on the stoop of the building.
Right, you haven't moved.
I haven't moved. He comes back up the steps. He's like, no, I can't do this. He's like, please. It's like the middle of the day, right? It's like 1:00 in the afternoon. He's like, please, will you just come with me for like let's just get a drink or something? And I'm like, okay. So I get in the stranger's car. I'm sitting in the car. He's talking to me. Music's on or whatever. Literally, we drive maybe 5 blocks, and we're in Notting Hill, right? We're basically in Notting Hill. He's like, he stops at this pub, and we're outside. It was kind of a springish day. And he says to me, he goes, what do you want to drink? I said, well, I'll have a tea. He's like, you'll have a tea? I'm like, yeah. He goes, me too, I'll have a tea. We sit down. It's so silly. We sit down, and his phone is buzzing and buzzing and buzzing.
He has to be 8 different places or something.
Totally. And so we end up talking for like at least an hour and a half at this pub. And he goes, I have to go to the he goes to the toilet, he goes to the loo, right? He comes back, and while he's gone, his phone is incessant. So I'm like, oh my God, this guy's married. He's
Mm.
like, he's like something. He's like, I'm really sorry. I'm like, your phone's ringing off the hook, like somebody's trying to find you. Like, don't bullshit me, right? Anyways, long story short, he asked me for my number, and I was like, I don't know. Like, your phone is ringing. Like, I don't know. And he's like, really? And I'm like, yeah, really. He's like, wow. He's like, please give me your number. And I was like, oh my gosh, this guy. He's like, my heart is already like 100% with him, right? So I'm like, okay, well, it's my best friend's number. Like, I give him the number before I even get home, because my best friend had roommates, and the girl that answered the phone, her name was Rosa. She comes in and she's like, is this the lovely Karla? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And as we're standing there, the phone rings again, and he's calling me to ask me out on a date.
Wow. And like, did he also have this incredible intuitive hit, or how does he describe when he saw you?
Yeah, he said he remembers driving by me. First of all, he did the wrong turn, right? So he's like, holy shit. So then he doesn't want to get caught. So he's driving down. He sees me. He said he saw me, and he's driving, and he's like, he said he almost got like a message. He's like, no, you have to go back. So then he went back. He jumped out, started talking to me, and even as he was leaving, he's like, no, this feels so contrived that I have to actually go back. So yeah, it was like we both had that feeling, and yeah, it's super powerful.
So amazing. So did you end up like living in London for
I
a,
did.
a while after that?
I did. I lived in London for close to two to 3 years.
Wow.
And then we left London together. We went to New York together, and like, yeah, the story is it's really a beautiful
Wow,
story.
so amazing. Hearing that story too, it's like comforting, because being in the dating world, being on dating apps, it can feel like frustrating and just sometimes difficult or hard. But hearing that story, it's like, well, when it's right,
Yeah.
really, you actually don't have to do too much.
Yeah. It's almost like, like I knew inside of me, right? I've been all over Europe. I've been like, I'd had boyfriends before, but this really was like, I would say, the first love of my life, honestly. And I knew it. Like, the moment I saw him, I knew it. And yeah, it's just I knew inside of myself, I'm like, I would always think to myself, when am I going to meet that person? Like, when is that person coming for me? Like, when is that going to happen? And it's like, when you least expect it, that's when it happens.
And I also love, because in other stories, going and getting in this guy's car could be this totally crazy story. But when you're in touch with your intuition and you trust yourself, and when you're getting that message, it's like, no, of course I will. It's fine.
I know, it's so crazy. I was sitting in the car going, oh my God, am I a psychopath? Like, how can I even be trusting this person like this? And I'm just like, whatever.
It
Just
is what it is. I mean, even for him to like drive back again, that could also be weird behavior. But
like stockish behavior or something,
when you're
right?
getting that message, it's just, it all makes sense. And it's not, nowadays too with dating, it's like, oh, there's this whole thing, you don't want to triple text somebody or like send too many messages or this, that, but that's all just a game. It's
Yeah,
not the real thing.
yeah.
That's all
I
this
think,
game that you're playing, that when there's
I think,
nothing, there aren't two authentic people there.
yeah, exactly. So I think, like, for sure, like, my daughter's now on dating apps and things like that.
Yes.
Yeah. And then I say, like, put pictures of yourself as like yourself, right? Don't be like trying to pose or do something different, or try to, be more physical, let's say, like physical, like looks, like more like, being sexy, if you don't want to call in men that only want that,
Mm.
right? So you got to be yourself and really be still like, if you feel sexy, sexiness is going to come through anyways, whether you're wearing little or a lot, right? It's still going to show in your face, it's going to show in your image, and it's going to show when the person replies to you and what they're going to say to you, so you reply back and forth. But it's almost like if you call it in, I feel if you call it in enough, you manifest that person in your mind. You realize what it is you want like a spiritual being, or you want to know whatever your requirements are for yourself in this time in your life, that it's almost like just by being on the app, they're going to come to you. They'll find you, just like, or you'll accidentally fall on somebody that's just like, wow, this is so perfect. It's so weird.
There we go. I need to go apartment hunting then. It would seem.
Right. Exactly.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you.
Just, I always tell my daughter, I'm like, look, just always like, you love yourself first, whatever you do, because there's no one and nothing, no experience that's going to fill that hole in your heart from like past trauma or whatever, right? Because you need to be that for yourself. Like, if you go into a relationship with anyone, even a friend, girlfriend, a friend, like, you got to go in 100%. You can't be, it's none of that stuff that our parents used to say to each other where it's like, oh, 50-50. I'm like, no, it's 100 and the other person is coming 100. And so then you share whatever you share in the middle, but it's already coming from 100%. Like, how amazing is that?
Yeah, I don't want any half people. Thank you very much.
Yeah, right? You don't want to feel, be the other person's half. No, that's their job. That's their responsibility. Your responsibility as person is like, what are the thoughts coming out of my mind? Like, how am I thinking? Am I a negative person? Am I a positive person? Do I love myself? Do I, don't like the way I look? Well, if you don't like certain things about yourself, do something about it, right? Accept yourself as you are. Like, we're all different sizes and shapes and mentalities and, education and background. And we're all so different because that makes it exciting. That's the beauty of it, right? As opposed to like being cookie cut and like, oh, I have to look a certain way and so people to appreciate me. Like, no, forget it. That's like passe. Like, all that shit is, excuse me, but that's shit. Like,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that goes back to what we were saying in the beginning about that old dating advice, like pretending to be something else to get somebody that's not a good fit for you, instead of just saying, no, this is who I am, and finding
yeah.
somebody there.
Yeah. And you know what? The people who are really who really love you, they're gonna support you and they're gonna help you rise and shine. They're not people who, because of their own unknowingness of themselves or because they have a gaping wound in their heart, like, tearing you down is not love, right? Insulting you, hurting your feelings, belittling you, gaslighting you, whatever, all those things, you need to recognize that that is not love. And you can, if you have the ability to cut that off and, find that inner strength in yourself, if that's the right choice for you, right? Like, if you're there to maybe help that person heal, then that's different, but you still have to maintain your own identity.
And care for yourself as well.
And care
And
for
care
yourself.
for your own well-being. Well, we have so many practices and tips and tricks from you, and it's just been so fascinating and awesome to learn more about you and hear all of these different stories and about the different practices that you help people with. So thank you so much for joining.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you for having me, Julie. I just really like, my message is really, I'm starting a membership. It's coming up, and it's really all about, like, the past, I feel, is very masculine driven, and it's all about competition, and it's about getting, how much can I get and how fast can I get there and who will I run over to get it, and it's very cutthroat. So I firmly believe in my heart that it's now time to rise the feminine so that the masculine can find its balance. And so when we do that, that's like living from your heart. That's living from love and compassion, understanding, forgiveness of yourself and of others, right? And so once we get in that space and we start to heal ourselves, like, it's not a secret. It's not a secret to, like, learn how to love yourself. Maybe you need the steps, right?
Right,
But,
or accountability or help or a cheerleader or tools, techniques. Absolutely.
So that's what we're going to be doing on sheispowerful.global.
So amazing. I mean, the name says it all.
Yes. And it's global. It's just that place is just, it's all about loving yourself first and foremost, and then spreading the love.
Amazing. Yeah. So if people want to stay connected with Karla, they want to check all of that out, links are below. And again, just thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure having you.
Well, thank you so much. And like anytime you want, and I'd love to have you also come on our membership as well. And one-on-one, I'll be more than happy to help you out with some of the other
So
things.
great. So great. I know I need some of that Ayurvedic advice already. So this is in the back of my mind.
Cool.
All right. So thank you guys so much. Take care.
Thank you.